Hi, friends. Welcome to the Mom Q podcast. I'm Candace Nasser. If the new year has you craving a fresh start at home, but feeling overwhelmed by clutter or pressure, this conversation is for you. Today, I'm joined by Dana K. White, bestselling author and host of A Slob Comes Clean. We're talking about grace-filled ways to care for your home and your heart without shame or perfection. So grab your coffee, take a deep breath, and let's dive in. Well, welcome, Dana. I'm so glad to have you here. Every mom knows that nothing disrupts peace faster than a chaotic home, especially after the holidays. You've been so open about your journey from feeling overwhelmed to finding freedom through decluttering. So why don't we start there and have you share your story and what was the breaking point that made you realize something had to change?
Well, I was born messy. I was messy my entire life. I had the messy childhood room that drove my mom crazy. I had the messy locker in high school where everything just fell out when I would open the door. And I had the messy dorm room, the messy apartment, but I was completely shocked when I got married and I was still messy because I had always thought, oh, it's just not my thing right now, right? Like at some point, like when I get married, it'll matter to me. And then
Mm.
obviously I'll be able to do that because I can generally do things, right? That I'm generally successful in other areas of life. And so, uh, was not the case. And then I had kids, and I was just like, well, I'm going to be a stay at home mom. At that point, this won't be a struggle anymore because that will be my job. Right. And now I know that even people who used to be naturally organized tend to struggle once they have kids. So it was even harder. And at that point, I really had an identity crisis because
Mm.
it was not that I wasn't trying. It was not that I didn't care. I thought I was doing what other people were doing in their homes or what people were saying to do when they gave advice, and it just was not working. And so, really, I wanted to be a writer. And I found out what blogs were. This is back in the early days of blogging. And I thought, oh, I've got to have a blog because that will, be a way to write that could potentially lead to the writing career I was wanting. And I felt like I needed to get my house under control first because I know myself. I throw myself into projects. And I thought this would just be one more thing to take my focus away from my home. And I wanted to write to encourage moms and things. And then I thought, well, but I would feel like I had to hide my house because it was such a source of shame for me. And that doesn't vibe with my personality. So I thought I'm going to get my house figured out first. And I tried and tried now with this new motivation and could not do it. And
Mm.
so it was actually the day before my second child went to kindergarten. I was sitting in church and I was thinking about how my life was going to change the next day. I have 3 kids. I wasn't going to have to coordinate nap times anymore. And I was like, this is the time to start writing. And yet God had not answered my prayer to fix this thing in me that drove me bananas. And so I was praying. I was honestly crying out to God. I was very frustrated. And I was like, why have you not answered my prayer? It's keeping me from doing this thing that I felt called by God to do. And God said, and I don't say that lightly, I don't say it often, but God said, just write about that.
Ah.
And I was like, okay, that's actually a really good idea, God. Okay. So I started what I thought was a temporary practice blog. I was not teaching anything to anybody, had no intention of this being the thing I was going to write about. I just thought, well, this will be a way for me to learn about blogging, the thing I wanted to do, while staying focused on my home. So I just was working on my house and recording very honestly exactly what I was doing and what I was struggling with and the thoughts that went through my head and what was working, what wasn't working. I used a fake name. This was my deep, dark secret that didn't want anyone to ever trace this back to me because I was going to get my house figured out and then I was going to start writing about things I felt qualified to write about. The joke's on me because it's now been 16 years. Still writing about this. I use my real name. This was the thing God wanted me to write about all along because I resisted teaching anything for a long time because I thought, why would someone want to learn this from me? I'm never going to be able to tell you how to have a perfect house. But I saw that, first of all, I learned there were so many people like me who were
Yeah.
completely confused and like, I think I'm doing what people say to do and this isn't working. Um, but God also showed me, this is what's missing. Most of the people who write about this stuff are naturally organized.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Right. their brains work completely differently from the way my brain works, and that so many others like me who struggle in this area, the way our brains work. And so that was the missing piece was my role as a writer about this is not to tell you how to have a perfect house. It's to teach you how to go from completely bewildered and confused and trying to, "Oh, now I get it. Now I get what to do. I can do this." Yeah.
How did that's so great. So I love it because you have that natural testimony, right? And then we can learn from you because
Mhm,
it's genuine.
mhm.
How did you learn the tools though? Where did you find all of this stuff?
Ground it out. I mean, I had read the things, right? Like I had done what people had said to do and it never actually impacted my home. And so I thought in the beginning I was like, "Oh, I'll read stuff and then I'll write about it and say what works and what doesn't." What in reality happened was when I first started, I was like, "I don't know what to do, but I know that my friends who are not overwhelmed in their home don't have dishes covering all their kitchen counters like I always did, right? I also knew that every time I went to clean my house, I had to start in the kitchen. It would take me hours to get the kitchen under control, and then I never got to the rest of my house. And so I was like, I don't know how they do it, but I am just going to focus on keeping my dishes done. That's it. That's all I'm going to
Mm,
do. And so I wrote about that. I worked on it and made that my sole single focus in the beginning. After about 7 days, I was like, oh, okay. All right. This is no longer overwhelming. It's not perfect, but it's not, I get it now, right? Like I get how to do this in my unique home. And so that I would add
love it.
habits and I would be like, okay, this is something else that drives me crazy. I'm going to focus on this. And usually after about 7 days, I would figure out how to do that in my home. All along the way as well, I was decluttering, which I knew I needed to do. And I was just figuring it out. I was just getting in there and getting stuff out. One of the main things that happened in the beginning was I thought, I am so far gone. Like, I was just like, I'm so overwhelmed that I think I'm just not even going to worry about organizing. I felt like that was a failure for me to
Mm,
go, you know what? This is how bad it is. I'm just not going to worry about organizing. I'm just going to declutter for now. I'll do the organizing later. That actually changed everything for me because it showed me decluttering and organizing are not the same thing. And just focusing on decluttering meant there were no plans to make or things to figure out before I got started. It was just getting in there and getting stuff out. And immediately my house started to change. And I saw the value of decluttering over organizing.
mm.
Even if you think that you want the color coded pantries, you have to declutter first. And the decluttering is the thing that completely changed my home as well as the daily habits
Yeah, we're going to talk about those things, and I'm so excited that we'll get to share those with our listeners. And I love what you're saying that it was one habit at a time, one
Yeah.
thing at a time. You didn't just sit down and say, "Okay, I'm going to organize my house." Well, that's we would all get hung up on that, right?
Well, I
Even
had done that many times. I mean, I had
mm,
sat down and I'd made the list of all the things I should be doing, and then I was completely overwhelmed just by the list. And if I got to any of it, it was barely any of it. And I was just like, that's too much. I can't do this. I don't know how people do this.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that is so good. And I think it's probably a time to go ahead and say, you talk about how it's clutter isn't just a house problem, it's a heart problem. And so can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. I don't know that I actually say that. I do say that the thing all along for me as a Christian woman, right or wrong, mostly wrong, I had taken on this idea that my passion was to be a mom and to be the, creator of this home for my children. So like I took this on it was a spiritual desire for me all along the way to have a home that glorified God. And I was trying to do that and I couldn't do that. So what actually happened for me was it caused a lot of spiritual confusion to me because I
Mm,
was like, wait a minute, people will say things like, "I- I- if you had enough faith, you wouldn't have all this clutter." I mean, like people would make statements like that, or
Mm.
they were trying to be helpful, right? Like they honestly were coming from a heart of that. But I was like, but I am trying, but I do have faith. So if I have all this stuff and I think I have faith, does that mean my faith is not real? Like that was the struggle and the confusion, because it was never, I never had a messy house because I didn't care. I never had a messy house because I wasn't trusting God. I had a messy house because my natural default with the brain that God gave me is to not see limits. That's a great thing, right? It did not serve me well in my home. So I had to find out the actual nitty gritty and learn, things like what I call the container concept, which is containers are not meant for putting things in. They're meant to hold, they're meant to serve as limits. And I was like, nobody ever explained that to me before. I had to figure it out the hard way. And when I figured that out, I went, oh, and it like changed everything. And so what God really showed me along the way was, Dana, I was never asking for you to have a perfect house. I wanted you to give me your heart to use
Yeah.
however it is that I want to use it. For me, that was my writing career. For so many people that follow me, it's that I'm going to let people into my house even when it's not perfect. Because
Yeah.
the truth is the clutter was not out of a lack of faith. The clutter was out of so many ideas of how I could help people. How, like when I work with people now, I see it in them. Their clutter is not out of a desire to hold on to things. They've brought these things in because they thought of the people they could help one day. They've
Mm.
thought of the creative ideas, the beautiful things they could do. So it's out of love and concern for others that all these things have come in. And yet the fact is, it was just so much stuff that there was no hope of my house ever being under control because of that. So coming in, does that answer your question at all? Yeah, I like
Yeah.
to be really clear about that, because it was a spiritual struggle for me, because I was like, okay, if I've prayed for God to help me in this area, what does it mean when I still can't figure it out?
That that absolutely makes sense because we don't understand. It's you needed the Holy Spirit to share with you what the issue really was, and that's what you're saying is that you had to surrender it to God, and then He began to show you. Is that what you mean?
Right. And what he showed me was this was not a spiritual failing. This was not a spiritual failing that my house was a mess. It was simply that there were things I needed to learn, and I needed to accept the way that my brain works, which is
Mm.
exactly how he made me. Right? Like, so all the times when I was saying, what is wrong with me, because I was trying to follow advice written by people whose brains God made differently, what I needed to do was say, okay, this God made me different, and that's good. He
You
made
know
me on
what?
purpose.
I
Yeah.
love that so much because
Yeah.
this is a good time to think about Pinterest and
Mhm.
social media and how we put these standards on ourselves based on that. And then I know for myself that when I don't have things in order, I tend to, first of all, I'm comparing and judging. And then I'm saying, well, I can't have anybody over until, right?
Right.
And
Right.
then that means what happens? I don't necessarily have people over. So that's not, hospitality I know is something that God has gifted me with. And so I need to
Mhm.
be leaning into that and getting over that
Yeah.
aspect of this perfect ideal. And I think that's also what you're saying is that God has created you with all of these ideas and all of this, you're collecting things to give away and all of that. And so it's going to sit there sometimes and that's okay.
Yeah, and the thing too to remember is that, it is my house was never a mess because I didn't care, right? And I think that's one of the biggest things, is that for someone who is naturally organized and can't imagine it getting to the point that it's gotten to for so many people, the assumption is that what I need to do to help you is to explain to you why you should care or why you should want it to be different. And I was like, but I do want it to be different. I just didn't know how. And so the how is where I come in, and what I teach
Right.
is, I know you care. And so, my most recent book is called Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House. And it's so funny, people's reaction to that title, because people are like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I mean that Jesus doesn't care about your messy house. Like, he cares about your heart. He's looking at beyond the mess into your heart and removing that shame of, oh, okay, like, what is grace? Does grace actually apply to this? Yes, it absolutely does. And when I when I understand that, it removes the shame, and that removal of shame is actually what lets me move forward, right? And
So
so I'm
good.
definitely not saying, I'm never saying that your messy house doesn't matter, but I'm saying that because I already know it matters to you. Right? Like, that's the reason why God gave me this unique, weird career that is never at all what I would have imagined, right? He gave me this because I needed to write Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House after I wrote the guides on how to get your messy house under control, right? To make
Mm.
that clear, of course, it matters that your house is under control to a point where you can live comfortably and do the things that you want to do. Of course, right? But it doesn't matter spiritually because nothing I do matters, right? Like it is only what God has already done for me. But understanding what God has done for me gives me the freedom to do the things that I need to do without this thought or misconception or, incorrect thinking that I'm doing that to get closer to God,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not performance based. Is
absolutely not.
absolutely not. And I think of Mary and Martha. I can't help but
Mhm.
think of the story of Mary and Martha and how uh sometimes we can get so focused on making everything perfect that we miss spending time with Jesus or serving him in the way that we should. And that's what Mary did, right? And sitting at his feet. So I think that what you're saying is super valuable. And I love you're talking about shame and getting rid of
Mhm.
shame because absolutely, I mean, most people want an orderly home or at least
Yeah.
not chaos so they can have peace. And that shame freezes us. It
Mhm.
freezes us and keeps us from moving forward. Um, great,
Yeah.
great discussion. So how about we talk now about some practical tips?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So talk about your 5 minute rule.
Yeah. So the 5-minute pickup it's transformational. I do always have to be clear that the reason I came up with the 5 minutes is that it was the least amount of time I could justify. Because I would look around and I would be with my friends, when it was bedtime for their kids and their houses were under control, right? And so I was like, I see that before bed every night they have their kids pick everything up, right? And I'm like, that's what we need to be doing. Totally obvious to me, right? The problem was my kids would be in bed and I would go, "Oh, we should have done a pickup." Like it just never crossed my mind, except in moments where I was like, we're going to do this tonight. Well, our house was so far gone that to pick up before bedtime was like, oh, well, we need to start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon then, and we'll still not be done by bedtime. Or we're all exhausted and it's like, let's do a pickup and let's pick everything up before bed. And the kids were like, what? Grandma's coming now? I mean, like that was the thought, So I was just like, I know I need to be doing a pickup. So I started doing 5 minutes. I was like, I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. I'm going to pick things up and put them away for 5 minutes. The impact of 5 minutes was shocking to me. And the beauty of it is 5 minutes the first time I do it, and it's 5 minutes still. So it is not a matter of getting everything perfect and then starting to do a 5-minute pickup, which is what I used to think was the only thing that made sense, right? Like it doesn't make sense to do 5 minutes when 5 minutes is not going to get everything done. I have got to get my house under control and then I'll start doing 5-minute pickups. Well, then I was never getting my house under control. So in the beginning, it was just 5 minutes of us picking things up and putting it away, truly being 5 minutes so that the kids learned that I meant 5 minutes and
Hmm.
not actually trying to trick them into spending 7 hours picking up the house and all. Like that 5-minute pickup from the beginning has power from day one. But in the end, it becomes my goal of getting the house under control with a 5-minute pickup lets me know that we're under what I call our clutter threshold, meaning we only have in our house what our unique family with our unique personalities and our unique makeup and our unique stage of life exactly right now. If we can get the house under control in 5 minutes, then that means we only have in our house what we can handle. And so the 5-minute pickup is valuable from the beginning, even when you're like, well, there's still so much more to do. still do it. But the goal is that I keep decluttering and I keep decluttering and I keep decluttering until we are at the point where on a regular day, everybody working together, 5 minutes is enough to get everything picked up and put away. And that gives me a very real, I don't know if tangible is the word, but a real goal that
R-
I'm working toward as I declutter.
realistic, really.
Yes. And it's maybe it may be years down the way, but if I'm continually decluttering, I can gauge whether I have decluttered enough according to, is the 5-minute pickup enough to get our house under control, which then means that, oh, yay, my house is under control. We can do this. And then I start to feel, oh, and 5 minutes isn't enough anymore. Oh, well, it's not that we failed. It's just that we've brought more stuff into our house, or our life situation has changed and things are a little more stressful. We need to have less stuff. And so it's like, oh, okay, well, then we just need to declutter some more and get rid of some more stuff.
Okay, so let's talk about how do you declutter? And I know the container, you mentioned the
Mhm.
container concept, so I know that's part of it. So,
Mhm.
so talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, so I have a 5-step process that when I wrote my book, Decluttering at the Speed of Life, I put the strategies I had been learning into a step-by-step process. And honestly, having that process has been transformational for me and for so many other people. So the first step of the process is to look for trash. Okay. There are many people who are like, I don't have trash. Who has trash? You've got trash. We all do, right? Like, it's just a fact. But the beauty of that being the first step is that even if I'm confident I don't have trash, I'm still going to look for trash, because it takes me from looking at the overall pile or closet or cabinet or drawer full of stuff, where before I would open it up and go, and I would just want to shut it and just shut down because I was overwhelmed. Instead, I say, all I have to do right now is look for trash. As I do that, I am starting to look at individual items. And so it's no longer a mass of stuff. My brain is starting to actually acknowledge and see what is in this space, which is going to help me through the whole process.
I
But
see.
also, it's decision free. At this point, I'm not going, well, what would my mom say is trash? Or I need to convince myself that to throw this item away, that I've really agonized. No, I'm saying obvious trash. Is there anything in here that I already know is trash? So it's decision free. I'm not using any emotional energy, and I'm making an immediate impact. I'm making actual action. I'm moving at this point. Um so as I do that, I've put stuff straight into the trash or the recycling bin if I already have an established recycling routine. This is not the time to start one, right? But then I'm going to move to the next step, which is the easy stuff. Easy stuff is anything that I already know what to do with this item, right? Like, it's just in the wrong place. And I'm
Mm,
going to get it out and I'm going to take it to its already established home. Again, it's decision free. I'm not making any decisions at this point. I'm just identifying things I already know what to do with them. And is makes an immediate visual impact. Every time I come back to this space after taking something easy to its already established home, this mess is a little bit smaller. It's a little bit less overwhelming. Right. And so then the third step is just obvious donations. I'm giving myself permission to say, is there anything in here that I immediately know can go into the donate box? Again, I'm making progress with zero emotional energy being spent, zero decisions being made. And the going from this place was completely overwhelming, I didn't know what to do, and now I've gotten out the trash, the easy stuff, and the obvious donations with no emotional energy being spent. This space is significantly better, which then I am in a very different frame of mind. I'm a different person than I was when I started. I have confidence now. I've seen an impact in this space, and I'm ready for step 4, where I do start making some decisions, but I'm still not going to be making them based on emotions. I can feel
mhm.
those emotions, but I'm not going to make my decisions based on that. So the way I do that is, at this point, the only stuff left in here is stuff that either belongs here or I have no idea where it should go. And that was what would get me stuck before. I was like, I can get started, but I get down to all these little things and I'm like, I have no idea where these things are supposed to go in my home. And they don't have a home. And then everybody would say everything has a place and, a place for everything and everything in its place. And I was like, good for you, but I don't know where things should go. know?
Yeah.
So at that point, I pick up an item and I say, if I needed this item, this earring that I just took off because it was knocking against my headphones, if I needed this earring, where would I look for it first? Okay. So I never ask myself, is it a good earring?
Ah.
I never ask myself, will I ever use it? I never ask myself, does it have value? Because those are the things that let my brain spin out, right?
Yeah.
And because I am a highly creative person, even if it is a broken earring, I see its value because it could be a craft project. It could
Mhm.
be, what if I decide one day to get another piercing and then I would need another single earring or something. Like all these things go through my head. So instead, I just ask, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first? That's different than what I used to do, which is, what is a good home for this, or where should this go? Because where should this go lets me spin out into looking on Pinterest. Where do people keep their earrings that are broken and that they might use, or I would ask my grandma or my mom, where did you keep yours? And there's all these shoulds, which is also how you end up in situations where you're like, I got organized and now I can't find anything. That's not being organized, right? Like that's the opposite. And every time that would happen, I would be less likely to even try next time because I would think, the
Yeah.
last time I got organized, my house was a disaster. For a long time. So instead, where would I look for this first? With no confidence it's going to be there at the beginning of what I assume is going to be a 3-hour search, tearing my house apart looking for this earring. I know I've got that. Where is it? So I need a place for it. I picture myself looking for it and I go, well, what's the first drawer that I would open? What's the first closet I would walk to? What's the first shelf I would look on at the beginning of this search that I assume is going to happen? And then the key is that I take it there now, right
Mm.
now. So I don't make piles of things to then put away later, which feels less efficient, except that I am distractible, especially when I was developing this method. My kids were little. I had a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and like life was going to happen. And I'm more distractible than most people anyway. Or I was just going to be like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And then I would be left with piles or boxes of things to put away later that would then live outside the space that I was originally decluttering. So I had made a bigger mess. Then that mess would morph into one big mess and my house was worse off for having done this project. And so I had to come up with a way to keep myself from creating a bigger mess. That's why I call this the no mess decluttering method. So I take it to its home right now. If I get distracted, this space is only better because I have no piles. There is less in this space than there was before. So I have successfully decluttered. I'm not done decluttering, but I have decluttered. And that means that I can stop at any time, which knowing I'm going to be able to stop at any time is usually the thing that lets me get started, right?
Mm.
Is that I'm not making this huge commitment of pulling everything out of a space. And therefore, I'm going to have to commit the next 10 hours or 3 days or whatever to this. So I'm willing to get started because I know I'm not making that huge of a commitment. But every bit of progress is real, unbacktrackable progress because things are going immediately to their home.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if I can't answer the question, where would I look for it first? That's when I ask my second question, which is, if I needed this item, would it ever occur to me that I already had one? Because I didn't have an answer for where I would look for it first. So I need to be honest that the reason I didn't have an answer for that is that I would never go looking for it, which means if I needed it, I would buy another one and that would add to my clutter, which was a huge part of my clutter problem, right? I didn't know what I had. Things were a mess. I didn't know where things were. And so when I needed something, I didn't even go looking. I just went out and bought another one, which meant I ended up with like multiples of all these different things, which then made my house harder to manage. And just, but that was the endless cycle
Sure.
there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you asked the question,
Mhm.
if I need, where would I go look for this first?
Mhm.
And then what was the next question?
Well, if I have an answer to that, I take it there now and I'm done
Right.
with that item.
Right.
But if I don't have an answer, I ask, if I needed this item, would it ever occur to me that I already had one? because I have to be honest that the reason I didn't even have an answer for where I would look for it first is that I wouldn't even go looking for it. And in that case,
Okay.
it needs to go in my donate box, which is hard,
That's
right? Because I'm seeing it
mhm.
in my hand right now. And so I'm like, but I see it. So, but
That's
yeah,
good. That's
yeah,
what I was thinking was the
yeah.
next question. Was it
Hmm.
I mean, the next step was it needs to go
Yeah,
in my donate box.
yeah.
I mean, my husband and I'm pretty organized and I can
Hmm.
get through things. My husband wants to sit and look at and attach
Yep,
emotional value to
yep.
every little thing. And so I'm seeing a lot of that. You're taking that out of it. And I really like that because that's where it gets hard
It
is
is.
when you start to think, well, but, right?
And that's why it helps so much in helping other people declutter, like your husband, because I don't have to be the one to say that. Well, I mean, maybe you wouldn't be saying this to him, but that's a broken earring. Why
Mm,
would you need a broken earring? Because if somebody says that to me, I'm like, well, you don't understand me. And therefore, this isn't going to work. Because you don't get how. Instead, it's like, okay, you would look for your broken earring in the drawer above the washing machine. Okay. But we take it there now and we face the reality of that drawer. And we say, okay, this drawer is full of other broken earrings or other things that you've thought about for, craft projects in the future. All right. So what are you willing to get rid of? I don't even have to go, the drawer is full. Like that's the tendency, right? Especially as moms with kids. We're like, hello. But instead I get to say, okay, well, what are you willing to get rid of to make room
mhm.
for this broken earring?
Yeah, that's a
And
key question.
it is because I am not saying the broken earring is a bad thing to keep. You can have all the emotions. And so that's where the emotions come into play, but I'm still not using them. I get to honor them. I get to honor what makes me me and how I see creative things, but I'm not letting those things make the decisions because as long as I was letting those things make the decisions in my house was unmanageable and I couldn't be the creative person, right? Because
Right.
I didn't have the space and I didn't have the bandwidth and I was overwhelmed by my home. So I say, okay, what am I willing to get rid of to make the space for this? And generally I can see this is actually a piece of trash that somehow ended up in there. Well, that takes me back to the space I was originally decluttering because that's where my trash is. Oh, you know what? I can donate this item that I stuck in there years ago that I'm never actually going to use. Okay, I'm going to put that in the donate box. So it is all very fact based,
Mhm.
which lets me be me, but also my house be under control.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
love that.
yeah.
And then is there one more?
Yes. So the fifth step is to embrace the realities of the space, which is basically the container concept that we briefly mentioned before. The container concept is just that space is finite. Containers are meant to serve as limits, and that's good news because it frees me from everything having to be a value decision. Instead, I get to say what deserves space here, right? So the first part of this fifth step is at this point, everything that's left here is like, well, yeah, I would look for it here first. But it's still too much. It's still too full. So I'm going to, without taking everything out, put like items together. I'm going to consolidate. So I put, the gold earrings together and I put the silver earrings together. Just doing that means that I'm touching items and acknowledge, before it was like, it's an earring, it goes in here. But when I pick it up to go put it next to something else, often it will reveal itself as an obvious donation because I'm like, oh, I actually cannot stand these earrings. There's a reason why I, didn't like, and I stick those in the donate box. Once those things are together, I also am going to see I've got 7 pairs of silver hoops in exactly the same size, which naturally reveals, "Oh, okay, I can get rid of 4 of those or 5, my least favorites, right? So I'm not saying this isn't a good earring. I'm just saying the size of the space is the size of the space. And if I try to keep more stuff than will fit in my space, there is no hope of it ever being under control because I'm acknowledging the realities of the physical space. And so, it just naturally helps me get rid of some things. And then at that point, when I go, there's still too much, I say, well, then I'm going to get rid of my least favorites or the least necessary, the least important until what I have left fits in this space. And, my husband and I we did a video and he had gotten a new mug. And so we were on vacation. He was like, I know which one I'm going to get rid of. And I was like, yay.
Oh, you
Like that's a big deal, right? And so we did a video of like getting, rid of the mugs. And he loves mugs. Like they all have a lot of memories attached to him and people who gave them to him and places where he got them. And I said, well, let's get rid of your least favorites until what we have left fits. And he said, thank you for saying least favorites. Thank you for letting me call it a favorite. Because for the person who gets emotionally attached to our clutter, that's me too, I used to think that the only way to get rid of something was to convince myself that I didn't love it, to convince myself that it didn't have any value. Well, that's just not how I see stuff. I see the value in things. I do have that emotional attachment. But if I am saying, well, the space that I have is the space that I have, so I'm just going to get rid of my least favorite, I still get to acknowledge that I love this item, that it means something to me, that it's valuable to me, but I get to blame the space and say, I would absolutely keep this, but it doesn't fit. And somehow that lets me let go of things that if I'm just saying, is it good or bad, I'm going to keep it. Right. And so it works really well with other people. It works really well for me. And it works
that's so
really well
good.
with children. Like it's because
I can see that.
I don't have to be the bad guy. I don't have to be the one who says, you haven't played with this in 3 years. Well, they're looking at it and now they want to play with it, right?
Yeah.
Instead, with my daughter, same thing. Was like, this is the special space that I have cleared out for your stuffed animals, which is fun, right? So let's put your favorite ones on there first. And that is a fun process to pick your favorite ones. And then once that shelf, it was like a 3-shelf unit. It was like once that shelf was full, I was able to say, okay, well, it's full. So the ones that didn't make it onto the shelf, we're going to donate those to other kids. And she's already sorted out her most favorites from her less favorites. She still loves them. And that somehow works. And then
Yeah.
if it's like, oh, but I have to keep this monkey, right? Okay. I get to always say yes, but I'm not saying, yes, we get to keep everything. I'm saying, absolutely. You love that monkey. What are you willing to get rid of in order to make the space for the monkey? Oh, I can't do that. I get to be sad with her. it is sad that there's not enough space for everything. So we can hug, we can cry, we can be sad about this. And yet the size of the shelf is the size of the shelf. I would love it if we could keep them all, but it's just not a fact, Yeah.
I love that because I can see often those situations devolving into just emotional wrecks. Like you're in an
Absolutely.
argument and meltdowns and all of that. And
It
that's
turns
just,
into a power struggle.
mm-hmm.
And that is the problem often when we try to help someone else declutter, right? Is that they hold on tighter. They may not even want the thing, but I'm going to hold tighter because now it's turned into a power struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So great. Wow. Well, these are incredible tips. And I know the container, like when I saw your container concept, I first envisioned like these massive clear containers from Target, but that's not really what you're talking about. You talk about just whatever it is that you are going to fit this in to make those decisions. Okay, if I'm adding one, I have a limited space. And if I'm adding something here, then something else has to go.
Yes.
And it's a logical decision.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's really good. Really, really practical. Okay, so as we wrap this up, Dana, you've given us so much great things to practice and think about. What would you say to the mom right now who is trying to put away everything from the holidays? There is all this new stuff and she's completely overwhelmed. What is one small step she can make towards peace in her home?
Start with the trash. I know that sounds like, wait, what? No, I've got all these toys to put away and then the kids are going to have to make these hard decisions. But start with those non-emotional things first. Like that is actually highly satisfying to make real progress and clear space just by getting rid of trash. Like that power of doing that is going to open up space for these things that you don't know where to put it. Like just go with those non-emotional steps first. I often will hear from moms who say, okay, I heard you speak at a mom's group or whatever. And I'm like, what do I do about if I don't know if I'm going to have more kids, right? Like they immediately go to the hardest, most emotionally difficult decision that I personally have absolutely no bearing on that decision, right? Like that is not up to me. But I'm like, don't start with that. Start with the trash because if it's trash, it needs to go. If it's an obvious donation, like if you just zero in on trash and obvious donations first, you're going to start to feel under control in these areas and you're going to free space up. And then with all those new things coming in, ask yourself where you would look for it first. Take it there now. And whoever's thing it is gets to decide what are we going to get rid of in order to make the space for this. And
Yeah,
it
just go through the process.
go through the process, follow the process. Having a process, knowing there's a process is so helpful in those moments where I'm like, it's too much. Oh, there's a process. I mean, I use
Mhm,
my own process. I talk myself through it verbally every day,
mhm.
pretty much.
And then
Yeah.
we can practice the 5-minute rule or
Yep.
all those
5 minute pickup.
different things. 5-minute pickup. Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Well, I love that we're talking about we can have peace in our home without
Yeah.
perfection.
Mhm.
We can just make small steps. We can
Yeah.
follow a process and that we don't have to feel shame
Yeah.
that God's grace is in the middle of all of it and that he's going to lead us through. And the most important thing really is our heart in the right place, that
Mhm.
we are submitted to him and surrendered to him. And what is he showing us and all of those things. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate your wisdom.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
This is
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.